So we all know that blood pressure is one of the most important aspects of our cardiovascular health. We also know that it is a very important aspect of how blood vessels themselves are going to work. Now, blood pressure is basically measuring how much force is being placed or how much force there is on the walls of our arteries at any given time. Now, the reason we need this force, though, is because we need a pressure gradient. So we need a difference in pressure from one place to the next. That's what's going to cause the movement of the fluid on that direction or in that direction. This is what's going to keep blood moving through the system. Now, it is measured in two numbers. It is measured in the systolic pressure and the diastolic pressure. Now, we know that the heart contracts with our left ventricle or with the ventricles. So when the ventricles contract, that's what's going to push the blood into the arteries. Now, when the left ventricle contracts, it's going to contract with an average of around 120 millimeters mercury in pressure. Some people it's higher, some people it's lower. Okay. But that force that heart is kind of smashing with, that is putting that much stretch, that much pressure into the walls of our arteries. So we're going to have to be able to stretch to be able to deal with that. Okay. Now, then when the ventricles relaxed, our vessels are going to recoil and go back to that kind of static central circle that we kind of started with. That is what we're going to call our diastolic pressure. So systolic is during ventricular contraction. Diastolic is in ventricular relaxation. Now, typical person or kind of the average or health here that we're looking for is around 120 millimeters mercury for systolic and around 80 for diastolic, which means we have a difference in 40. That difference in 40, so that difference between our stretch and our recoil is what we're going to call our pulse pressure. Okay. This is going to be very important for measuring kind of overall flow through the system. And we're going to be using that pulse pressure to do some calculations later on. Now, in order to measure blood pressure, what we need to do is we need to figure out how to stop blood from moving through this blood vessel. So what we do is we actually put a little pressure cuff here. Okay. And when we inflate that pressure cuff, what we're doing is we're basically trying to squeeze this blood vessel so much that all of a sudden blood can't flow through it. Then as we slowly relieve that pressure and we slowly open that cuff a little bit, eventually when the heart is pushing hard enough or the blood vessel itself is pushing hard enough against the cuff that it allows blood to move through, that is going to be our top number. That is what we're going to measure as our systolic pressure. Then when we can no longer feel any constriction on the vessel, that's to say we're not feeling a pulse of pressure move through the blood pressure cuff. So we're no longer hearing the pulse moving through the vessel that we just occluded with the blood pressure cuff. That is when we have now reached our diastolic pressure point. So that will be our lower number. So when we start to hear the pulse, that is going to be our systolic. And when we stop hearing the pulse, that will be our diastolic. So remember, systolic is force of the ventricles contraction. This is going to be our higher number. Diastolic is going to be the amount of pressure just that we have in our general shape of that particular vessel. And that is going to be our diastolic. Now, the reason that it's so important for us to maintain healthy blood pressures is because over time, like chronic hypertension can lead to our blood vessel walls kind of hardening up a little bit, what we'd call atherosclerosis. Okay. When that happens, then if all of a sudden you have, say, a stressful event occur and all of a sudden the systolic pressure is 160 or 180, all of a sudden that may now be pushing against a much harder blood vessel, and that much harder blood vessel isn't going to be able to deal with that extra force as much. So that is when it could potentially fail. So that's part of why it's important for us to maintain our blood pressure at healthy levels so that we don't form or harden our vessels too much or anything like that.